This month we're doing a series of lessons about developmental processes that kind of leading into the Gary Simmons weekend, but also I think these are things that people on a spiritual path need to know about. Next month we're going in a whole different direction and we're going to talk about mystical stuff. So that'll be fun too. Last week we talked about spiral dynamics, and I know everyone here wasn't there then, so I'm going to do a little bit of a brush up on that. But spiral dynamics is essentially it's a vertical model of human development that was developed starting in the 1950s by a guy named Clare Graves, who was at Union College in New York, a colleague of Abraham Maslow, who was right down the hall from him. And it talks about levels of human complexity in terms of how we think. And what Graves found inadvertently in his study of these levels as they began to appear in his research was that as we think on a more complex level, as we move from one level of complexity to another, many of our values actually change. And that was something that no one had really realized before. And where this model is being used, there's really some interesting stuff going on. It's been used in places like Palestine and South Africa, and even in Ireland, to help heal tremendous rifts that are based on these different complexity levels, when we really thought the cause of the conflict was either religion or culture or something like that. So today we're going to look at that a little bit more, and we're also going to look at the idea of how evolution, the evolutionary theory, is being used to understand how we evolve as human beings. Teilhard de Chardin, who was one of the great thinkers of the 20th century, a Jesuit priest, if you know about him, he was also a paleontologist. And he was usually in trouble with both the Jesuits and the Vatican, and they would send him away. They sent him to China for 20 years to get him out of the way, because he kept talking about evolution, he kept talking about science and discoveries, and they sent him to China to get rid of him, and he discovered Peking Man, which created some difficulty. And he says, is evolutionary theory a system or a hypothesis? It is much more. It is a general condition to which all theories, all hypotheses, all systems must bow, and which they must satisfy henceforward if they are to be thinkable and true. Evolution is a light illuminating all facts, a curve that all lines must follow. You know, often we hear about the conflict between science and religion, and evolution is often part of that conflict, or seen as part of that conflict. But it really isn't so much between between science and religion as it is between a very small group of people that we would call creationists, because they believe that God created the world just the way it is. And some believe 6,000 years ago, some believe much longer, but the belief basically says that we didn't evolve from what came before. We were all created independently. There seems to be a lot of scientific evidence to disprove that, but nevertheless, that is a belief held by apparently about 50% of Americans. Do not believe in evolution as it's described in the scientific realm. This isn't about making anybody wrong. It's just pointing out that it's an unsettled issue culturally. It's not really unsettled scientifically, but it's unsettled culturally. Spiral dynamics looks at the evolution mainly of complexity. You could create a model about the evolution of intelligence, or the evolution of emotional awareness, or the evolution of our physical natures. This model only looks at one thing, really, which is level of complexity of thought, and then there are attendant value systems that emerge. So last week we talked about the different levels, and I think I have a slide about that. And the spiral says that the levels of complexity get more complex as you move up the spiral. So when you're born, you're down here at beige, which is a newborn infant. No real sense of self, not a complex thinker at all. Matter of fact, you're pretty much a little bundle of emotional needs and physical needs, and when your needs aren't met, you cry. And when your needs are met, you gurgle and coo. And eventually, as you move up the complexity level, you realize you can gurgle and coo with a purpose. that you can begin to control your parents. And most kids figure this out by about 3 months of age, that they become in charge of the household. And they learn how to use their emotional expression. They don't have any language yet, but they learn how to use facial expressions and emotional reactions to get their needs met. Okay? And then purple, and culturally, beige was the first, million or so years of human existence, pre-hominid and so forth, where there were basically very simplistic living. Just bands of people might get together to hunt and gather, but they didn't stay together. They came together and broke apart and things like that. And then tribal, which is purple, emerged about 40 to 50,000 years ago, which is a long time, but it's a very small slice of all human history. And purple emerged at a whole nother level of complexity, that the tribe became the most important element, and you became, as an individual, you became subservient to the tribe. And at purple, there's all kinds of things about, I think I have, actually, hang on a second, let me find that slide. Yeah. At purple, I'm just going to put these up. At purple, you have more the sense of we're all one, magical animistic thinking. Purple shows up in more complex levels as love of ritual, as superstition, as good luck charms, things like that. That's that level of complexity of thinking. And by the way, when you move above one level, we still contain vestiges of all the ones we've left. So individually, we have a level of purple, and then collectively we do too. Red would be in an individual the terrible twos. When you learn to say no, you learn to individuate, in a sense, beginning a process of individuation from the family. In the world, this was where this emerged about 15,000 years ago or so, and this was people that said, you know what, this tribe's holding me down. I can get a couple of guys together and we can go out and raid the other tribes and just get our own thing going. So red shows up today in things like needing to save face, where that's very important. Putin is operating at red in a large sense, because a lot of what he's doing is about saving face for Mother Russia, but really about himself. And I'll give you an example of someone who's operating at red. When I was in the police department, we had a case where old woman was walking down the sidewalk, and a kid came up and said, "Give me your purse," and she said no. So he grabbed it, and as he yanked it away, she held on, and she fell down and hit her head and died. She was about 90. And he took the purse, and off he went. So in about 2 hours, we caught him, and we were interviewing him, and he still had the purse, which had nothing in it, by the way. Turned out it was her good purse, and she only took it to go out and walk around the neighborhood when she wasn't going to the store. Okay, so yeah, very sad. Now he said to him, you killed her. He says, "I didn't kill that woman." "What do you mean?" He said, She could have had, stayed alive. All she had to do was give me the purse. It's her fault, not mine. Now he wasn't, that's red. Okay, you ever have a 2-year-old that breaks something and it's your fault for giving it to him? Same thing, right? Same level of complexity and so forth. And then out of that emerges blue, and blue is where we kind of get into school. We start to get organized, and we start to learn that the world has purpose and so forth. And blue at the larger level began to emerge about 4,000 years ago. But 4,000 years ago till about 1,000 years ago, it was really leading edge thinking. See, as these new levels emerge, they're like the people that are the most advanced. That's where they're thinking. So at the time of Jesus, blue was maybe 5 to 10% of the world. Everybody else was still at purple and red, which is tribal and this power god thing. So lots of, if you looked at them wrong, they'd kill you. They say if a person today, one of you, were taken back in time and dropped into biblical times in the Middle East, you wouldn't live through the day. Because you'd be so different than them, and they'd be so afraid of you because of that they would just kill you. Okay, and back in those days, one of the beliefs that's fairly common among anthropologists, that if Jesus was in fact crucified, that he wasn't buried, he would have been thrown in what's called a common pit. And there were common pits along the sides of roads and places where they would throw carcasses and garbage, and if people were executed, they throw them in a common pit as a way of denigrating them, and the animals would come in and feed in the common pit. So that's probably, if you went back to biblical times, you'd probably be in the common pit before the end of the day. That's a red-purple level of existence, see? It's not very pleasant. It can be very cruel and very harsh, and it's very hard to get people to see anything beyond what they know. Okay, so blue begins to become predominant up through the Middle Ages, city-state. You need a level of blue complexity in order to have a big city, a real big city that functions well. So you begin to see that. The great institutions begin to be developed in blue. When you're in blue at an individual, you're in school and you're kind of getting civilized. And you begin to see there are authorities you need to obey and things like that. Orange emerged about the time of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. Orange is kind of an entrepreneurial way of thinking. It's very scientific rational. So everything has to make sense logically and scientifically. And orange is predominant today in corporate America. It's very strong in politics. Our politics are mostly right now blue and orange, where you have the true believers at blue and you have the folks at orange that are all about business and the economy. The next level that emerged is green. In the 1960s, green emerged. If you think about the 60s, I know some of you were around then. Okay, what that was like. But green is very egalitarian. Every voice must be heard. Everyone must be valued. The world should work for everyone. Feelings are more important than outcome. If everybody isn't happy with the decision, we shouldn't make the decision. Okay, about 25% of North America is operating primarily at this green level today. They're called the cultural creatives. If you want to know what one looks like, look around the room. And then those first six are called first-tier thinking. The thing that holds first-tier thinking together is they're all fear-based. At first tier, the basic underlying level of thought is if everyone doesn't think the way I think, we're all doomed. So there's a lot of energy about trying to get people to see your way. And every level does it differently. Up to about blue, they conquer you if you don't play ball. At orange, they buy you out. Green tries to love you into compliance. You see. Green is also very anti-judgmentalism. In fact, they're only judgmental about judgmentalism. So it's kind of, and then second tier emerges, and today it's said to be maybe 2 to 4% of the world population is functioning at what's called second tier, and the difference there is second tier is more empowered, more love-based, not a lot about ego defense, and often people who are operating at first tier, when they encounter someone at second tier, they don't like them. There's a lot of threat there. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. So that's just kind of, I got to do all this. Let's go back to the quotes. So Ernest Holmes in the Beverly Hills Lectures. The Beverly Hills Lectures was a series of talks he gave at the Beverly Hills Church of Religious Science back in the 1950s. And there's a book of those lectures. It's very interesting. But this quote I thought made sense. He said, "The moment you step out of the ordinary ranks, the moment you step out of the procession that moves endlessly down the aisle, you are in the spotlight of evolution. Your own choice has decided you, and you are no longer going to think as others. You are no longer going to lay your greatness at the feet of a person whom you recognize to be great. The moment a person steps out of the endless stream of humanity, he no longer goes by the norm that was set by the mass mind. He is a leader. He is a thinker. He is one who introduces new things to the world." Now that was Dr. Holmes, and he was an advanced thinker for his time. You know what he's talking about? He's talking about blue to orange. He's not even talking about green yet. Because at the time, in the 50s and 60s, green wasn't really that predominant, and orange was where to go. Orange was where all the great leaders in our movement were. Dr. Bitzer, Dr. Barker, they were talking about what? They were talking about how to make money. They were talking about how to have good relationships, how to get that job you want. It was all about working with the law. And that's where our teaching was at that time, primarily. Still is there to some extent, but it's no longer necessarily our primary focus. Nothing wrong with that, but this just shows that evolution was occurring at the time. And when Dr. Holmes first began to write, if you go back to the textbook, it's a little more blue. That was more the predominant way of thinking at the time. Orange is more individualistic than blue. So it's kind of an interesting story. Claire Graves, who founded or created the spiral dynamics model, says, what I am proposing is that the psychology of the mature human being is an unfolding, emergent, oscillating, spiraling process marked by progressive subordination of old lower order behavior systems to new higher order systems as man's existential problems change. Now, when he did this, nobody knew what the hell it was because he was a terrible marketer, as you can see by that sentence. His students actually came up with the name spiral dynamics and the colors and everything so people could begin to understand it. But if you get it, he was saying, an unfolding, emergent, oscillating process. We are waking up from within to a more and more complex way of being. And as we move up that level, that ladder of evolutionary steps, we let go of some of the old ways of being. At the same time, we're embracing new ones. Now, the problem is most of us do this unconsciously. And when we're not aware of what's going on, all we know is we're struggling because things feel different. Because the way we move from place to place is what used to work for you stops working. You ever had that happen? Of course, everyone has. What used to work doesn't work anymore. And then you got to find something that's new, and you don't know what the problem is. Why isn't it working anymore? Is it because the outer world has changed? Is it because I have changed? Is it because, circumstances are different? Am I forgetting what I used to do? What's the story? We'll skip this one again. We did that already. I love this quote. I know Woody's in a little hot water right now, but tradition is the illusion of permanence. So by the traditional level mindset is that blue level mindset. That's where all fundamentalism exists. That's where all the isms exist. Socialism, communism, fascism. They're all blue level, that blue is absolutist thinking, that there is one right way, and if you don't get in line with that and obey the authority, you're going to hell or whatever. Whatever the teaching says is going to happen to you. And that's people that are in that blue arena primarily, and again, we're usually across several different levels in the way we operate, but we do tend to have a center of gravity. And when I'm centered at blue, I'm just trying to figure out how to fit in and make things work and obey the rules. And that's really important to me. When people are centered at blue and they see people operating at orange and above, the people at orange and above seem to have no sense of value. But what really has gone on is their values are shifting. As you move away from blue in the more complex direction, things tend to get more relative rather than absolute. If you remember Pope Benedict, the last pope before the one everybody likes, he was functioning at a very blue level, and he preached against relativism. He said the truth is the truth is the truth, period. And what the church says is the truth. You cannot argue with it. That's a purely blue level of thinking and belief. And you've all existed in that in one way or another. Maybe you were brought up in a home where the blue V, it's called a level of existence, sort of dominated. And it's a lot of my way or the highway kind of thing, because there's only one right way. And blue can be a beautiful way to be when the world supports it. See, the way that all these different levels work is, as long as the world around you is at the same level of complexity you are, everything fits. But when the world gets more complex and you don't, you've got problems. So the world is moving beyond blue right now, the West anyway. Parts of the world, the third world we call it, are just coming into blue. So you see the Catholic Church burgeoning in parts of Asia, Latin America, and Africa, where they're moving from the purple-red levels into blue. And you see the Catholic Church dwindling in the advanced West, where people are moving into orange and even green in large numbers. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. So tradition, those that want to hold to tradition as the number one way of being are usually, he says, it's the illusion of permanence. It's saying, no, things don't change. Basic values don't change. What was right when I was a kid is the same as what's right now. Well, yes and no. Yes and no. How we raise children has completely changed in the last 30 to 40 years. There was a great article in the Atlantic Monthly this month about playground injuries. You know, they've been on, I don't know if you remember the playgrounds when you were a kid. The playgrounds today don't look anything like a big little Tykes thing today, right? Everything's padded and rubberized, and nothing's more than a certain degree high, and the sliding boards have to be a certain slope, and, you know, I mean, we had sliding boards that were like ski jumps, you know. You would try to land within 4 or 5 feet of the end of it, you know, just that's right. And the ground was asphalt or clay or gravel, right? But it's interesting that the studies that this article cites have shown that playground injuries haven't gone down. And creativity in children has. Kind of an interesting thing. So we would say, there's only one right way to be. And back when I grew up in the 50s, safety wasn't number one. If my parents had no idea where I was or what I was doing, I just had to be home for dinner. And today, your parents are with you. They're taking you to some place where you'll be completely supervised. You know, I'm saying right or wrong. I'm just saying, see the difference? And that's the evolutionary process. As orange and green starts to parent, they get very protective, because all of a sudden the kid's an asset at orange. And there's that's the push. That consciousness is the push to get into the good school and get the best job and make the most money and have the best status. And green just wants their kids to be loved and recognize individuality. So at the primary schools today, there's the green and orange parents going at each other about what's the right way to treat the kids. Kind of interesting. John Cage says, I can't understand why people are frightened of new ideas. I'm frightened of the old ones. But we are, aren't we? We're kind of afraid of, we're in a teaching that teaches change. I don't know if you know that or not. I mean, maybe you're here for the first time. You don't know what the hell we teach. But basically, it's about how to use your mind to create the life you desire, which means different. Change means different. And there is no moving into a different way of being without some degree of stress on the system. They also, the technical term for it is pain. It's painful to change, even when you want to. But it's interesting how even in our teaching, it took us, when we decided to merge the two organizations, we began to talk about merging the two organizations, it took 9 years. And we're like, you could put all of us in one football stadium. As my teacher used to say, we're not a small religion, we're an insignificant religion. And it took us 9 years to have the conversation. Why? Because of the heavy dose of green that exists within our organization where, oh, wait a minute, everybody better agree on this. It has to be 100% or we won't do it. See? And there are folks that were centered on orange are like, okay, all we need is 51%. We can get that done by next Thursday. Oh no, there'll be lots of conversations, and that was just a cultural thing that needed to be dealt with, a cultural level of evolutionary development. And if you don't understand the cultural evolution of any group you're in, you're going to have trouble, because what we all do when we don't know what level we're operating from, we just assume everybody's operating at the same level of us, and they're just all wrong. Right? I'm doing it right, you're doing it wrong. So it's kind of interesting. So we are afraid of going forward sometimes, even if it seems like a good idea. Well, that sounds like a good idea. Well, we're going to have to change something. Well, wait a minute. What are you going to change? Well, we're going to change the name from Church of Religious Science to Centers for Spiritual Living. Oh, I love that name. I came in because of that name 38 years ago. I love that name. Well, we did a test of with the branding company, and Centers for Spiritual Living has an 85% positive, and Church of Religious Science has a 32% positive when you talk to people that don't know what it is. So the right people will find us. And we're going to do away with the term religious science as a, oh no. I mean, I'm okay with the change, but let's not change those things. You know, and we're going to combine the ministerial education because each organization, we're going to do it the way my organization did it though, right? Because that's the best practice. Because I became a minister that way. Look at me. And I hear their way's more expensive. I wouldn't have been able to become a minister if it was expensive. So it shouldn't be expensive. It was all stuff like that. That went on for 9 years. You know, and we came together, and we're still having difficulty putting it all together. But it's just kind of interesting. Well, we're all about change, you know. So this is a model of in spiral dynamics of what it takes to go from one level to the next. And this would be, the alpha here would be one level, like say you're at blue, centered at blue. And the next alpha would be orange, let's just say, for sake of discussion. And somebody's centered at blue. In order to get to orange, there's two ways to do it. One is called evolutionary change, where you say, oh, I see the advantage of going up to that next level, and I understand what it is, and I'm going to make the internal changes necessary to make that change. And then you have just kind of go there. Okay, but that's not the way it happens for the most part. Most part, we go into what's called a gamma trap, where around this beta point, what used to work doesn't work anymore. Okay, you know, my kid, what happens? You see this a lot with parents. Quite often parents have kids, when the kids get into high school and college, that are a higher level of complexity than the parents are. Not unusual. Archie Bunker and Meathead's a good example. Okay. So what I used to be able to tell my kids what to do when they did it. And then there comes a point where that doesn't happen anymore. And I tell them what to do, and they not only don't they do it, they tell me what they're going to do, and it's different than what I told them. They're not even hiding from me anymore. They're confronting me. So what I used to do isn't working anymore. And what happens is I spiral down into a state of anxiety, fear, and frustration because problems are apparent, but there seems no way to do anything about them. So what I tend to do is I do what I used to do, only louder. Right? Or more forcefully. So I yell at them. Maybe I disown them to teach them a lesson. Okay? And you know what? Tough love. But they don't understand what tough love really is. They think it's just yelling. Because I'm coming from a fearful place. What used to work isn't working anymore. And it could be the same thing. I own a business. Let's say, you know, I make 8-track cartridges for... you know, or I make non-Greek yogurt. But I'm just really attached to non-Greek yogurt and 8-track cartridges. And the name of the business is 8-track cartridges and non-Greek yogurt amalgamated. So it's kind of who we are. It's our identity. I mean, you know, so the society has gone rampantly crazy and abandoned my products. You say, well, that's stupid. You need to do what the market wants you to do. But that's not always easy when it's in this kind of a dynamic, see? When a case right now that's going up before the Supreme Court on, I forget the name of the company, Hobby Lobby or something, that about the health care plan where they don't want to have to provide a health plan to their employees that includes contraception because it's against their religious beliefs. Okay? And you say, well, what's that all about? It's religious freedom. No, it's not. It's cultural levels of existence. The Obamacare, as it's currently constituted, is an orange level program because that's where the compromise is going to end up between blue, orange, and green. Green wants single payer. Green wants universal health care. Green wants nobody left out. Green doesn't have enough people in Congress to get that to happen. Blue wants every man for himself. And women, well, we never had to deal with women before. Why should we now? This blue wants to go back before the IRS existed, before the equal rights, before women voting existed. They want to go back because it was always better in the rearview mirror. Traditionalists tend to live in the rearview mirror. And you say, and by the way, logic doesn't work at either end of the spectrum, because you're dealing with values that people don't even fully understand themselves. It's just right because it's right. So we end up with an orange level program. Hobby Lobby's functioning at blue. They'll say, okay, I'm going to have to sue. And now we're at the Supreme Court, which is blue-orange, kind of equally split. It's going to be kind of interesting to see what they do with it. So we get into gamma trap, and what happens at many cases, some cases, we just stay there. We stay there forever in regard to a specific issue or a specific level of development. Sometimes things begin to click in, and a delta is where, oh my God, everything's working again. And you get all excited. And then you get up to the new level. Now you're at orange and everything's fine, but there's another beta coming, because the world around you is going to keep getting more complex. So this is the change model that we find ourselves in. Cindy Wigglesworth, who does the spiritual intelligence piece, says the bigger the context in which you can see your own life, the more informed your choices and actions are. It requires a level of complexity to step back and see myself as part of a larger process, a larger system. But the smaller I am, the smaller my context, the less options I have, the fewer options I have, because I can only see one way out. Or maybe I can see two choices, but not more than that. Let me know when you have the picture. I'll move the slide. Got to account for all these newfangled gadgets. So here's another way of looking. Here's this chart. Here's another way of looking at it. I simplified it. Okay, stable, stress, chaos, renewal, new stability. And you end up at a higher place than you were. But see, it's the stress and the chaos where most people exist in here. When you have a lot of frustration in your life, when things just don't seem to be, I always seem to be a little bit behind, or I don't know, I can't understand what's going on in the world. I can't understand what's happening to my kids. I can't understand why, my job has gotten so complicated. It's because maybe the external living conditions have gone up, but I haven't. And I'm in the process of moving through that kind of, the chrysalis piece that the caterpillar has to go through to become the butterfly. It's a similar kind, that's a great metaphor for this kind of a process whenever we're moving from level to level. Now, we're not all at one level. A very common thing is people are orange at work and blue at home. They go to work and they have the relative values. They want to do business with, orange will do business with anybody. Orange, when nations are at orange, they don't go to war because they get too many business dealings that would be screwed up if they did. Blue goes to war because we're absolutely right and you're absolutely wrong. So you have the ideological wars. Orange is like, I don't care who you are. I'll do business with Saddam Hussein. That's why you have to have laws that keep companies from sending nuclear stuff to North Korea, because otherwise American companies would do it. Matter of fact, they do it anyway, right? So I can be orange at work, then I'm blue at home, which means toe the line at home, absolute values, this is absolutely right, this is absolutely wrong. At work, it's whatever you think is best. Now, that can work in terms of the two situations, but guess what? You're schizophrenic. You're living on one set of values in one place and a different set of values in another place. And you got to keep it straight. It's not easy to do. That's what a lot of people do with religion. Most standard brand religion in our nation, in the West, is at best at the blue level. It's a magical, mythical God. Doesn't fit into the scientific, rational understanding of the world at all. But you go to church because you pretend that's what you're supposed to do. And then you go out into the real world and have to deal with real world issues that, that pastor talking on Sunday has no idea about. So you see people that they go to church for show, or to be seen, or to feel like they're doing what they're supposed to do. because the blue level is all the supposeds. You're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that. At blue, the male-female roles are very explicitly laid out. And if someone is by the way, if someone is functioning at blue, they do very well by joining the Mormon church or becoming, joining a fundamental evangelical church or a very conservative synagogue where it's all laid out for you. All you have to do is obey. And that works very well. But once you hit orange, it doesn't work anymore. See? That's why you see the tremendous move to secularism in Europe. Europe's a little ahead of us, by the way, in this developmental process. I know we don't like to hear that because we're the best, but we're just not the most complex. Canada's ahead of us, too. Canada's more green going into yellow. Europe is green going into yellow. United States is at blue-orange, primarily. There's lots of other stuff, but in Europe, 7%, less than 7% of the population go to church on a regular basis. And if you take out Italy, where 28% do, it's under 3%. They're just not going. The church, we go to Europe, we go to church on Sunday to see, and there's like two little old ladies in the front and about 30 tourists in a giant cathedral. And that's it. Because they've left behind that old view of God, and they haven't replaced it with a new one yet, although Deepak Chopra and Marianne Williamson and people like that sell thousands and thousands of books over there. There's a great hunger for spirituality there. Pop quiz. Is there more to life? Yes or no? And the chicken's going, damn it, I should know this. I would say it depends on your worldview, and your worldview depends on your level of complexity. At blue, when I'm centered at blue in the West today, in the United States or in Europe, what I see is a world going to hell in a handbasket because all the values are being trashed. What I don't understand is that a more complex level of thinking is emerging. Several more complex levels are emerging, and they have their own value systems that work at that level of emergence. You see? So if you ask you have lots of fundamentalist Christians that are just dying for the rapture to happen. They don't see any other way out because they look and they see a corrupt world. You see all those folks in the Muslim world who are centered at more purple-red in the parts of the Muslim world where the West wouldn't let men be educated for about 400 years. So they're a little behind in this regard. And they see a world that's full of corruption, where women aren't treated well. They let America, where women run around exposing themselves. And they say, that's horrible. That's a sign that the world needs to end. You see? These levels are so critical to understanding what's going on at every level, including within ourselves. Is there more to life? Well, if you're at a higher level of complexity, you probably say, yeah, sure, because you're experiencing a greater sense of emergence, and you're moving into a more relative kind of a viewpoint that says there's more than one way to express the truth. See? Because that's what's emerged. So we're evolving right along whether we like it or not. The question is, two questions really here. One, am I aware of this process? Most people aren't. And two, am I using my awareness to enhance my own capacities and ability to live in the world at the level that works best for me, whatever it is. And again, it's not that you want to be up higher necessarily, because the more simplistic viewpoint levels might work perfectly. But if I'm in a really complex part of the world and I'm trying to live at a lower level, I'm going to be in that gamma trap quite a bit, wondering why things don't work the way they used to, if I can even remember that they did work. And I'm hoping the world will take a turn back to the way it used to be. And that's never happened, by the way. Never. There's no, well, you can go see the movie Noah, where it happened. Of course, it didn't happen, but it's a story, and that's really a big focus of that. The folks that say that the Old Testament stories are are timeless because we should maintain those values that are shown. You know. But what happened to the dinosaurs? Did they just miss the boat? And why did he bring the mosquitoes? Thank you, and namaste.